the journey is more important than the destination. The journey is the destination. The journey is what counts. The process is what counts. It's so hard to actually live that way. I think girls have it a lot worse than guys do as well. Girls are taught from a young age to always strive to be perfect. This is not the way I want to live.
Today's guest is the world's most followed productivity expert with over 7 million followers across all platforms. He's one of the top YouTube educators in the world. He's an entrepreneur, he's a doctor, and is now the author of his new book, Feel Good Productivity. My friend, Mr. Ali Abdaal.
Not everything you do is going to feel good all the time, but everything you do, you can always choose to approach it in a way that makes it feel better. Everything about our mind and everything about what society tells us is to strive for the outcome. The mind is not a contentment machine. It's not designed for us to be content in the moment. It's not designed for us to be happy. It's designed for us to...
So how can we actually switch out stress for more play?
More people need to hear this message. And one of the things that really came up was this idea of...
Hello Dream Nation and welcome back. Look, before I get into today's episode, I just have one thing to say. Look, I always wish that I learned about business, entrepreneurship, personal development, and emotional intelligence way earlier on in life. So my goal with this channel is to turn it into that thing that we all wish we had way earlier on in life. And the only thing I'll literally ever ask you for is that you just simply subscribe to wherever you're listening to or viewing this episode today. That way, you're gonna help the show actually get bigger and better, making it more possible for us to get even bigger and better guests on the show, making the content even better for all of you. So if you can just take 2 seconds right now, make sure you subscribed, and then let's talk about today's guest. This was an amazing guest today. Guys, today's guest is the world's most followed productivity expert with over 7 million followers across all platforms. He's one of the top YouTube educators in the world. He's an entrepreneur, he's a doctor, and he came first in his class at Cambridge University and is now the author of his new book, Feel Good Productivity. But what I love most about this guy is his openness, and he's willing to want to literally serve and help other people. He's one of the most coolest freaking guys I've ever become friends with, and I'm super excited to bring him to you guys because this episode today is actually a very different one to one I've ever done before. This is a 2-part series interview because what I did with him, I sat down and I picked his brain and I went over his 17 most unconventional ways from his new book on how we can become more productive in our lives and in our businesses. So buckle up for the first part. Let's get right into it. And please help me welcome to the show, my friend, Mr. Ali Abdaal. Ali, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thank you so much for having me on.
The goal of this podcast is what I want to do is I've gone through your new book, which is actually just dropped today, by the way. So massive congrats on that.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Super excited for the people to actually get that, right? It's going to be super cool. And when I was reading it, I actually thought, because especially after also meeting you and seeing some of the other things you do online, I thought this was going to be a productivity book, which is going to help me amplify my productivity in terms of his practical things like manage your time like this, do more of this and less of this. And then when I started reading it, I was like, it is so not what I thought it was. And then I was reading it, and I was like, this is actually what you do need to be productive. Yeah. And the whole title is Feel Good Productivity. So the intention of this, I've picked out the 17 unconventional ways to be more productive as an entrepreneur and as a person.
Cool.
And I want to pick your brain on them for the next little while.
Let's do it.
The first thing is success doesn't lead to feeling good. Feeling good leads to success. I found that extremely kind of contrary to what I always thought.
Yeah. Oh, so this is this idea. Success doesn't lead to feeling good. Feeling good leads to success. It's not an original idea. People have talked about this. There is a very good book by a Harvard psychologist called Sean Aker called The Happiness Advantage, which basically talks about how when you look at studies of, how people perform at work and how happy they are and all that kind of stuff, you find that people who are happier tend to perform better at work. And people always assumed that the correlation was that, hey, if you're a good performer at work, then you're more liked by your peers, and then you make more money, and then you will be happier. But what a bunch of different studies then tried to do is figure out, could the direction of causality point the other way? Could it be, in fact, that people who are happier, i.e. people who experience more positive emotions, are the ones who perform better in their work life? And there's this thing called positive affectivity, which is like your propensity to experience positive emotions. And they find that people with high positive affectivity are way more likely to be productive, creative, less stressed, more successful in that work. They get better ratings from their managers. They get promotions quicker. They, on average, earn more money. All of this good stuff happens if someone experiences more positive emotions in their work. And so that's why success doesn't lead to feeling good. Feeling good leads to success. The people who are successful are the ones who have found a way to enjoy the process. Because these days, to be honest, the only way to become successful at anything is to find something and do it for a long time and just get better at it over time. It's very hard to luck into any sort of success. And the way you find something and are actually able to stick at it for a long time is by finding a way to enjoy the process. Discipline only gets you so far. Time management only gets you so far. Enjoying the process and feeling good about it leads to all of the positive outcomes.
What if the thing we're doing is not necessarily exciting? Like, let's say, for example, I think for people like you and I, it's quite easy, because if I have, there's only like probably a very small percentage of my weeks where I'm like, it's not overly enjoyable, and they're the meeting days.
Yep.
That's why I put them all in a few hours and I get them done.
Sure.
They're not overly enjoyable for me, but I do find ways to sort of still enjoy it. But if I think back to the days when I was a carpenter, hating the jobs I was doing, hating the people I worked with and all of this, how can those people like that discover fulfillment and feeling good in times when they're just like where they are, maybe they're in toxic environments, or the relationships or whatever? It's just like, I get what you're saying, but how do I do it?
Yeah. So that's kind of what the whole book is about. I agree, not everything can be fun and games all the time. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that every single thing in life that we do, we can always find a way to make it even just 10% more enjoyable. So if you think back, let's say you're a carpenter and you absolutely hate your life. There are 3 Ps you can incorporate into your work: play, power, and people. Those are the first 3 chapters of the book. Can you find a way, even while hating your life as a carpenter, to approach it more in the spirit of play? Could you lower the stakes a little bit? Could you have a little bit more fun with it? Could you approach it with a little bit more lightness and ease? Could you find a way to approach it with more power? Power means taking responsibility, taking ownership, taking control. Instead of thinking, oh, I'm just an apprentice carpenter, I've got to do what my senior carpenter tells me. Could you find a way to take ownership of the process? Could you find a way to actually level up your own abilities and think, you know what, my boss is telling me to work on this one particular beam, but I'm going to do a really good job on this beam. The more engaged you are with the process, the more responsibility you take over it, the more ownership you have over it, or the more ownership you feel you have over it, the more likely you are to be productive and perform better, but you're also going to feel really good about it. Like, no one enjoys being told what to do. And there's this weird thing around, like, you know, I think it's somewhat counterintuitive, but we think that, you know, if I don't like my job, I'm just going to coast. I'm going to do the bare minimum so I can get home from work and do what I really enjoy. But coasting is ridiculously draining for our energy. Like, no one likes it. If you're the sort of person that's like, oh, I hate my job, and therefore I'm going to half-ass it, you're going to be absolutely miserable. If you hate your job and you think, okay, how do I know I hate my job, but you know, that's just a story I'm telling myself. I might not actually hate my job. Let me figure out how I can actually approach it with more responsibility and take more ownership of it. You will magically find that you're more productive in the job and you also feel good about it. There's play, there's power, and then there's people. Can you find a way to tap into the fact that your work as a carpenter actually is providing a service to either your colleagues or your clients? Can you like really connect to that service component? Because there's something about that really taps into intrinsic motivation. When we feel as if our work is meaningful to others, even if we don't enjoy it, there's something about that feels really good. So the whole book is basically like, if you hate your job, then you're doing something wrong. It is not the job. It is not the circumstances. It's not the events. It's not the government. It's not the interest rate. It's not the job that you happen to have. It's the way that you're approaching it. And by changing your approach in a few small ways, you can radically change the way you approach your job and the way you perform at it as well.
I love it because it's like personal development 101. If you want your life to become better, you've got to first take responsibility for where you are.
Yeah.
I heard somebody say one time, people only ever admit where they are in life, but if they're proud of it. That's why you hear self-made millionaire, self-made billionaire. People are like, I've done this, but you'll never ever hear someone say, I'm self-made average, I'm self-made miserable, I'm self-made, because you only ever admit when you actually enjoyed the thing. So it's taken it really back to, because if I did think about that, like even on the shitty times when I was working as a carpenter, I think I kind of had that in my head, or at least after a while, I was like, I'm gonna do this anyway. And I've got 2 options. I can either come and hate the whole 10 hours here, or I can find a way to try to enjoy it. Even doing the shitty tasks, like how can I just enjoy this? And time goes faster, you do a better job, you feel better about yourself. It's this reciprocal thing.
Yeah, and you end up with more energy at the end of the day if you do that. It's like, you know, when I was working my sort of 10, 12, 13-hour shifts as a doctor, for the first few months, I had a really shitty attitude towards it. I was like, oh, I don't enjoy this. I just have to grind it out. Like, oh, junior doctors, we don't get paid enough. Fuck the government. Oh my God, like, oh, I don't want to be an admin monkey because I'm just writing these discharge letters. The shit that all junior doctors say when they complain about their jobs was stuff that had seeped into my mindset. And after a few months of this, I was like, actually, this is not the way I want to live. I don't want to live will sort of grind out the next 2 years to then grind out the next 7 years of specialty training, so that in theory, when I become a consultant at the age of 35 or 36 or 38, whatever the thing might be, then I'll enjoy my life. Because I was speaking to consultants who were that age, and they were also not enjoying their life. It's like that thing, if you can't be satisfied with a coffee, you won't be satisfied on a yacht. And I speak to medical students sometimes who are like, "Oh man, I really hate medical school. I just want to grind it out so that once I'm a doctor, once I get that thing that I've been working for, then my life will be fun." And I'm like, "Bruv, if you don't enjoy medical school, where going into work is optional, you will absolutely freaking hate being a doctor, where going into work is no longer optional."
Yeah.
And so I realized that I could actually control my own circumstances here. It's again the personal development, like the standard stuff that every self-help guru has been talking about since like the 1700s.
Yeah.
Like the way you think and the way you approach your work radically changes the way you perform at it and the way you feel about yourself. So, yeah.
Number 2 is, how does having more play lead to more productivity?
Yeah, so play is the first energizer that we talk about. When we approach things in the spirit of play, with a sense of lightness and ease, where we're engaged with it, but we're not taking it too seriously, that is when we get the optimal conditions for flow state, for creative output. And, often, depending on what your job is, that is the same thing as productivity. Most of us are no longer working in like assembly line jobs where we have to crank out like 10 widgets per hour. And so productivity for us is 11 widgets or 12 widgets per hour. In those sorts of jobs, yeah, fine. Like sort of grinding harder will maybe get you to 10, 11, 12 widgets per hour. It's a pretty miserable way to live life. Most of us are not in those sorts of jobs anymore. We're all broadly knowledge workers. The reason, the thing that we do for our jobs is to use our brain to create something or to transform something or to take some data and interpret it in some kind of way and turn it into a report of some sort that other people can understand. We use our brains for stuff. And so if we can approach whatever we're doing in the spirit of play, by being engaged with it, but by not taking it so seriously that it becomes very stressful, that is where our creativity can really flourish. And, there's a bunch of studies that they've done where they found that, people who feel good, experience positive emotions in their work, they tend to perform better in tasks of creativity as well. Csikszentmihalyi, the psychologist in the 1970s who discovered the concept of flow.
What was her name?
Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Spelt like Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. It's a weird kind of, very difficult to pronounce, but I had to look this up when I was recording the audiobook. He discovered this concept of flow state in like 1970, wrote a book about it. And we've all had that experience of being in the flow state where it's like time is flying and, we're fully engaged with what we're doing and we perform really well. And those times are usually not when we're very stressed. They're usually when we're taking a little bit of perspective. We're approaching our work with a little bit more lightness, and in doing so, we allow ourselves to play with it a little bit more. And there are so many stories of Nobel Prize winners and like athletes and stuff who have found that actually, if you can approach your work in the spirit of play, it becomes more fun. You feel good. You're more productive. You're more creative. You're less stressed. All of the good things happen. And the choice to approach work in the spirit of play is something that we all have, regardless of our circumstances.
So I want to share something funny here. So I was having a conversation the other night with a friend of mine, business partner actually, and he's about a decade older than me. I think he's about 40, I think. And it was a Christmas party we're having with a bunch of friends, and we're all having a few drinks. I had maybe 5 drinks by now, and that's usually like my limit now. I just don't like it. I used to drink so hard and party so hard, and I was talking to him. I said, "Do you just find it that because we're talking about New Year's Eve, and he's like, 'Oh, you got a drink?' And I'm like, 'Probably not,' And I'm like, how do you do you still can you still go and just get absolutely shit-faced and feel all good about it?" And I'm like, I just avoid it. I just don't. And he goes, there was this famous person, he was telling me a story, so I forget the name. There was this famous motorcycle rider, and he was winning every single race. Bang, 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 winning all those races. And then he started to lose a race. And his team came to him, he's like, "What the fuck is going on? Like, what's wrong with you?" And he's like, "I'm not sure, I'm doing all the things." And he's focused on success. And then what he did was, he went and got wasted. He went and had a loose night, right? Not that this is probably the cure for, but the idea behind it was he went and loosened up. And he's telling me a story. He went and just got drunk, had fun, and just had a bit of fun again, put some play back into it. His first race back was the day after. He's hungover as shit, and he wins. And he's like, so he's like, not necessarily go out and get drunk, but when we're so fixated on the work, the hustle, the grind, the lists, these things, if we do it for too long, we can get into this thing where we lose that playful side. And I did this I started my first business at 21, and I didn't know what a day off was until COVID came. So about 26 years old I was. And I was talking to my mentor, and I was like, I can't figure this out. Like, I'm working so hard. I want my business to be bigger. And he goes, when was the last time you had a day off? It's like, what are you talking about, day off? And he goes, here's what I want you to do. Every single week now, go and have 2 days off, completely off, guilt-free.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't think you understand what I'm saying to you. I want your advice to help me be more successful. You're telling me to go and have fun. Yes, that's exactly what I'm telling you to do. So obviously, I'm a good mentee. I was like, okay, if you say I can do this, sure. I went and booked a place away in the rainforest, deleted all my social media for 3 days. Did nothing except hike. I read books, I watched movies, I drank wine, I made food by myself. And it was awesome. I come back, I made more money in my business for those 3 days that I was off doing nothing than I did. It beat my biggest week of the year when I was working my ass off. So I was like, so in the 3 days, and that was when I really realized that it's the pendulum swing. Like, if I'm so far this way all the time, where I'm just on all the time, but I never allow myself to actually come back, then that is really the secret. When did you learn that actually playing more and having more of fun in your life was actually a thing that could help you be more successful?
I discovered this when I was in medical school. In my first year of university of medical school, I had this sort of grindy approach to it. I was like, oh, this is really hard. It's like, you know, I did pretty well in high school because I didn't need to work too hard, and I got good grades anyway. And then I got to medical school, where I was like slapped in the face by realizing I cannot rely on sort of innate intelligence to get me through this, because everyone else was also really smart in high school and I was bang average. And I was like, oh damn, okay. So in my first year I tried to sort of grind it out, and I was like, I'm gonna work really hard and pull all-nighters and do all that shit. In my second year, we had a psychology lecture from this professor who was teaching us about how to study more effectively. And I was like, whoa, no one's ever taught me how to study more effectively. And this like lecture changed my life. And I was like, oh, there's all these techniques that you can use to actually just, you know, in the same amount of time, just memorize way more stuff. And given that medical school is basically about understanding and memorizing, great, that means I can be more productive with this. And so I kind of went down a little bit of a rabbit hole and sort of followed up on the research papers myself and kind of gave some talks about this, because I was like, more people need to hear this message. And one of the things that really came up was this idea of finding a way to enjoy the process. There's a theory in positive psychology called the broaden and build theory, which is that when you experience positive emotions, you're more likely to expand the actions available to you and build resources and stuff. We can go into that. But it kind of made me realize that, hang on, there's something here around, yes, you've got all these techniques for working smart, and previously all I was doing was working hard. But there's this whole other thing of like working fun. I mean, I have outside the lab, but like working in a way that you actually enjoy the process. And so I started actually actively trying to apply it to my life. So in my first year, I was locking myself in my bedroom and studying, because that's how you focus, right? In my second year, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go to the library and I'm going to invite friends along, and I'm going to listen to Pirates of the Caribbean soundtrack through my headphones while I'm studying. Technically, your retention of stuff lowers if you listen to background music, because I looked at the stuff.
Really?
By like a small amount. Like music with lyrics is like kind of bad.
Lyrics for sure.
But like even instrumentals is like not ideal, because you want to mimic the conditions you have in the exam, and you don't have background music in the exam. Okay. But I was like, you know what, fuck it. Who cares? I'm happy to take the hit in efficiency for the sake of a gain in enjoyment.
Enjoying it. And
in my second year, I smashed the exams. I got a first-class degree. In my third year, I continued the same strategy. I ranked first in the year that year. And I was like, okay, cool. This shit really does work. When you find a way to enjoy the process and just treat it with a little bit more play, then everything just improves.
Number 3, you must choose a new character.
Yeah. So one of the things around play is that when we are kids, we find it very easy to play. And kids play all the time. Like, you don't need to convince a kid to stop playing. They just do it naturally. But as we get older, as we go through school, we get told all these stories around all these things like, oh, growing up means you stop playing, and like, you know, you've got to take life seriously. And we get into this conveyor belt where we're judged in terms of grades and performance, and like, you have to do this to get a good job and all this sort of stuff. The play really gets squashed out of us. I remember, when I was in high school, and I couldn't let my mum see me playing video games because she'd always be like, "Hey, if that guy's playing video games, it means he's not studying," and therefore, she would find something for me to do. She'd be like, "Well, clean the house," or like whatever, or like, have you done your homework? All of this sort of stuff. So the spirit of play really gets squashed out of us by very well-meaning parents and society as we get older, and so what we have to do as adults is try and reconnect with this idea of play. And one way to do that is to choose a different kind of character. There's something about getting outside your own head and imagining doing your work as if you were a different character that taps into something different in the brain. It helps us get out of our own heads and approach the thing more playfully. And there's this psychiatrist in the US who founded the National Institute of Play, which is a thing in the US. And he did like 5,000 interviews with people from all walks of life during his like history taking and things. And he was interested in what were the archetypes of playful behavior in people throughout life. And he basically boiled it down to 8 different things, which are all in the book. But one of them, for example, is it's sort of based on how did you enjoy playing when you were younger? Some people enjoyed kind of directing. They're the director. They enjoyed organizing people and like putting stuff together. Some people were more kinesthetes. They enjoyed like doing gymnastics and like rolling around and jumping around. Some people were more storytellers. They enjoyed like telling stories and capturing people's attention that way. And so part of choosing your character is connecting to thinking back to how did you enjoy playing when you were younger and how can you bring more of that into your work. But also another way of doing it is to think, could I approach my work as if I were a different character? So next time I'm working on, I don't know, a YouTube video or a presentation or writing something, for example, could I approach that as the Joker, which is one of the archetypes of play? Could I approach it as a Joker? What would that look like? What would it look like to inject a little bit more humor into that? And almost trying it on like a different set of clothes. You're trying it on and seeing how it feels like.
Like a new archetype or a new, like you're acting kind of.
Exactly, yeah. And when we're acting, again, it helps us take the thing less seriously. And again, we shouldn't need to tell adults this, but actually we do. Like adults need to learn how to play a little bit more in their work because we're so used to being, I fucking hate my job, I've got to grind, all that crap. And so the character thing is one tangible, practical way of, in a way, encouraging your mind to get out of the way and like having a little bit more fun with your work.
I definitely want to go back and revisit that section actually, like intentionally, because I think like one of my highest values is fun. So we do bring in a lot of just fun into everything I do. Even when one of the events I run goes for 40 hours in it, right? So kind of like, so Tony will do, well, Tony is day with Destiny, he's all day, right? But like, so I'm on stage for about 12 to 15 hours a day, 3 days straight. And the only way I'll get through that is if I have a shit ton of fun.
Yeah.
It's like, so just like playing with the audience and just like not taking things too seriously. Like I'll literally have a page with a few dot points on it and that's 10 hours of content.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the funness for me is when I get up there, it's never the same thing over and over and over. It's quite similar, of course, as the major things, whatever, but it's never the same audience. And I love the variety of that. I love the spontaneity of that. Because if I was up there to just do the thing again, I reckon I'd fall back into when I was a carpenter, would rock up on the job site. Oh, here's another house. Just do the same house again. If would build the same like units side by side. So we'd finish the whole unit. Great. Go next door. Start it again. It's like fuck. It's just so. So I focus a lot on bringing that in. So I want to look at the new character. What's your favorite character to play?
For me, it's a storyteller.
Yeah.
I try like even when I was writing boring discharge letters when I was working as a doctor, as like, these letters that you write summarizing a patient's hospital visit to send to their GP. I was trying to find a way to sort of weave an engaging narrative. Normally, like I would read these discharge letters, they were boring, that people would just like write a few bullet points. But I kind of wanted to tell a story because stories are more engaging and they're more fun to write. And I was trying to piece it together in my head and trying to add a bit of banter as well. I just love the storyteller side of things, which is, I think, why I vibe with making YouTube videos and writing the book. It's the storytelling at scale.
I love it, man. So what I love so much about the whole, like, this book is, like I said from the start, it's not even so much of do these things, like tangible things. It's the whole, like, if you actually improve the way you actually operate and view the world, then everything around you is going to improve. So one of the things, obviously, is feeling better. One of the things, chemicals in our bodies that make us feel better is dopamine. I'm an absolute addict I skydive and everything. So I just love shit that just, So what's your favorite ways? Because one of the ways is to actually make us feel good is to produce more dopamine. What's one of your favorite ways that we can produce more dopamine on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. So there's a phrase I came across recently, which is that dopamine is not about the pursuit of happiness. It's the happiness of pursuit. And so pursuing something that feels, even if it doesn't feel meaningful, just like pursuing anything helps drive dopamine. So the way that I do this and the way I apply this to my work is essentially by tracking my progress. So when you're, like a lot of writers will do this, for example, they'll track their word count as they're kind of going through a writing session, and they'll feel good about it once they hit 1,000 words or 2,000 words or whatever the thing might be. For whatever I'm doing that I'm struggling with, that I need a little bit more feel-goodiness into, I try and figure out what is that equivalent, what is my equivalent of the writer's word count? How can I track my progress such that it feels good to be hitting these milestones and reaching for these things? So with the gym, for example, there's an app I use called Strong to track my workouts. And it just shows me what did I lift last time in this particular exercise. And then based on that, I think, okay, I'm going to do that plus 1 extra rep, or that plus 2 extra kg, or whatever the thing might be. And there's something about writing the numbers down and measuring them where I can see the graph and I can be like, yeah, that feels very dopamine inducing. It feels good. I'm like, yeah, I'm making progress. And I think, you can find ways to apply that to literally any job. There is always a way to track progress, and tracking progress feels really good if you feel like you're improving at something.
We actually embedded into my company because I thought about that, because everything I do is background of why people do the things they do. How do we do better at the things that we do? Yeah. And I knew that. I was like, if we have a score, if people have a score, what we naturally want to do is beat our score. Video games, gym, that's why everyone's like, my PB, this, and this. And if we have lists as well, people want to you get dopamine when we cross something off a list. So I actually embedded these scorecards for every single employee that we have. So they all have individual scorecards where they have to-do lists for the week, because I know we all put things on a list, and every single thing you tick off, you're going to be more excited. But then what we did was, this changed the game. Everybody has a metric that they have to, like, it's a not good, good, outstanding. So we have a not very good number, you hit the nail, you absolutely killed it. And I let them all make up their own numbers. So every single department's obviously different. Marketing's an easy one, how many new leads or whatever, right? But they all have numbers. So then every single week when we meet, right? So we meet on a Monday, we go through it all, we set them all. On a Friday, they have to fill it all out. Then on a Friday, I see it. And what I know is we see so much productivity on a Thursday and Friday because they want to smash their own numbers. They don't want to write a number that's worse than last week. No one wants to get on there and fill out their scorecard and go, fuck, I did worse this week. And if they know it's coming, they'll actually change their behavior. They'll do something differently. And since doing that, we've just seen insane amounts of productivity increase.
Nice.
Yeah, people are feeling good.
Yeah, I think there's something about scorecards, tracking numbers, gamifying. It's all the same kind of idea. I think there is a way to overdo it. Like Amazon gamifying their warehouse workers and making sure that it's like your toilet break is 28 seconds long and then you have to get back in that particular time. People don't enjoy that because that's what
they do there.
Yeah, it's like, Amazon has had a bunch of heat about this.
I haven't heard of it.
Like overusing gamification to exploit their workers would be kind of the narrative. But I think there are nicer ways of doing it. And if we can find that, numbers drive our own behavior, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's so good.
All right. Number 5. You've already mentioned this one, so let's go deeper into this one. Focus on the journey, not the outcome. What I'm curious on this, so my backup question to this topic here is, isn't this easier said than done?
Yeah, I mean, everything in many ways is easier said than done. Like you and I can talk about, hey, figure out your values and just change the rules you have about your towards and away values. Obviously, it's very easy for us to talk about that and very difficult to actually do the thing. We can talk about how it's important to be consistent when going to the gym or when making YouTube videos, but actually doing the thing is really hard. I think similarly, it's almost cliche at this point, but this whole idea that the journey is more important than the destination. The journey is the destination. The journey is what counts. The process is what counts. It's so hard to actually live that way because we're so everything about our mind and everything about what society tells us is to strive for the outcome. The mind is a survival machine at the end of the day, and it cares about hitting certain outcomes like being safe and not getting mauled by the tiger and getting food and getting more food and getting more food and stuff. The mind is not a contentment machine. It's not designed for us to be content in the moment. It's not designed for us to be happy. It's designed for us to survive. Similarly, society and capitalism is not designed for us to be content. It's designed for us to drive and to want more and more things, so that we think that, advertising, when I get that Mercedes, then I'll be happy. When I get that Lululemon t-shirt, then I'll be happy, whatever the thing might be. So it's so hard to actually live with the idea that actually contentment is found in the journey. The process is what matters. Screw the outcome, focus on the journey. It's so hard to do. And I find that the more reminders, I think I think there is profound power in reminders, even though it's a bit cliche to say journey before destination, or the journey is the destination, or like, don't focus on the outcome, focus on the process. Yeah, sure, it's cliche, but it's cliche for a reason, and we still need those reminders. We still don't do it enough. And I still need those reminders for myself. Whenever I find myself feeling even vaguely stressed by, launching this book and doing all this interviews and dealing with like calendar juggling and having to cancel on people and reschedule shit, I'm just like, it's easy to focus on the outcome. It's easy to fixate on like, okay, once all this is done, then ... But even, you and I were talking before this, and you were like, how's the book stuff? And I find myself saying, oh man, it's pretty intense. I can't wait for it to be over. And I was thinking, no, fuck that. Like, what am I doing? Like, the present moment is all there is. My goal here is to enjoy the process. My goal here is not like, oh, I can't wait for like the next month to be over so that I don't have to do any more publicity. It's not like I don't have to do any of this shit. I'm choosing to do it. But even then, even though I've written books about this and I talk about this so much, I try and remind myself on a daily basis, I still fall into the trap of thinking the outcome is actually meaningful. The outcome's not meaningful at all. It's just about the journey. And, I think the more people talk about this, the more it's talked about in podcasts and books and quotes and motivational things and all that kind of stuff.
What's up, Dream Nation? Have you ever wondered how far ahead your life would have already been if you had got access to this type of content at a younger age? Look, this is why I need your help. I'm trying to build the #1 personal development platform out there to teach you guys the tips, tricks, and attitude of what it takes to live your dream life, and to bring the type of education that we all wish we had in school. This show only grows by word of mouth and new subscribers, so it would mean the world to me if you could smash that subscribe button right now, leave us a 5-star written review, or drop a comment below and share this episode with a friend. I would be forever grateful. All right, now let's get back into this episode.
I think those reminders genuinely make a difference to my life. Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of is like a muscle, because as you said that, I thought, so we have an event we run every single year. I was telling you about next year, we're doing it, called Dreamfest. And this year, when we were doing it, in 2023, when we were doing it, James spoke at it. James Smith was speaking at it, right? And I found myself, it was the biggest one we did. There was so many moving parts, and the year before we did it, like so many things fucked up in it. And I was coming into the event, like we were at the event the night before, so we had a late night, and I was pretty fucking exhausted. I woke up and I said to my partner, we were both leaving, and we were cooked before it even started. Yeah. And we said to each other, we're like, in a really like, allow me just to sound like a dick for a second. She's like, okay. I'm like, I can't wait for today to be finished. I'm like, I'm done. And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, why do I do this to myself? Like, I don't need these events. Not really. Like it works, and obviously I'm not stupid. We make money from it and whatever, but it's mainly driven from like, I want to create an event that I wish I had when I was 18. I want to make an event that's so dope, that's like fun, and it's parties, and it's DJs, and it's entrepreneurs, and it's value for like less than $100 for a ticket. Like, I want to create something so sick like that. So the obsession of wanting to make a massive impact and really create something amazing sometimes comes at the loss of me, I guess. So sometimes throughout, I'm like, and it was all year, man. Like, I woke up in January having fears, because it was the biggest investment we ever made, right? I was like, this event is scary. And every time I opened up social media, when I was having these fears, I saw some motivational thing come up. It was just like timely perfect. It's like, the biggest growth of my business was the times after it that scared the shit out of me. And I was like, okay, I get it. I gotta keep doing it. I get it. But I was the same. I was walking into the event going, I can't wait for it to be finished. And then when it finished, I said, well, what are we doing for next year's? And I was like, it is just like a sick thing. And I think how I kind of look at it is trying to, what's that word? Like cognitive dissonance. I try to hold both simultaneously. I try to hold the outcome of everything I want, and at the same time being like, it's like half my mind knows exactly what we're wanting, and we're getting to the outcome one day. Yep. And I also kind of hope the outcome never comes, because as soon as I get about like the 90-yard line, I don't know why I say yards, 90-meter line, I will actually move the goalpost again.
Yeah.
I've hit goals before, and I've felt more unhappy once I've achieved them than when I did when I was pursuing them. And I learned that, when I learned during that, I was like, never actually achieved the goal.
Yeah.
Once you get close enough to it, I move the goalpost again, because it's never actually about that. But if I've got to continually make sure that I'm having fun and enjoying it, because otherwise I do what I did coming to the event. But I do it all the time too.
Mate, this is... Like, if anyone's listening to
I hope someone's listening
this
to
is like the profound truth of life.
Yeah.
That like the outcome is basically meaningless, so the journey is what matters. And we all kind of land at that. We all land at that at different times. And I totally vibe with what you're saying. It's about being able to hold both ideas in your mind. I think those of us, especially who are in sort of personal development and entrepreneurship, is like we're always looking for the next thing to grow. We're always looking for the next, like, I want to 2x my business or increase revenue by 30% or whatever the thing might be. The way that I found to think about this is, to your point, the only real point of a goal is so that it can give... The only point of a goal is so that I can picture a destination, and that allows me to choose what direction I'm going in. So it's not about the destination, it's about the direction. Because pursuing the goal of like doubling my business takes me in a different direction than pursuing a goal of 10xing my business, which takes me in a very different direction of I want to get married and have 3 kids next year, which would be very difficult to do in a year. But it would take me in a different kind of direction. And given that the journey is the thing, the way I think of it is like, yeah, sure, let's set goals. Goals are important. But then we want to almost forget that that's the goal. Or at least have like, you know, a part of our mind being like, yeah, I'm working towards, you know, getting sales for my book. But the bulk of my mind and my body and my presence is focused on, and I want to enjoy every step of the journey to get there.
Yeah.
And if I'm not enjoying the journey, then like, what's the point?
Yeah.
You know, the present moment is all we have, really.
Yeah. I love that. So I've got 2 reasons why I think goals are super important. First is what you said. It gives us the direction. I think a lot of people who are lost in life, or they're stuck, or they're not sure, it's because they don't know what the hell they actually want. Yeah. I think I actually opened my events by saying the first reason why people don't actually get what they want in life is because they don't know what they want in life. They fail to set goals. I put something in my story today, actually. People are like, New Year's resolutions. And I said, here's a life hack. You can set goals every fucking day. Not just January 1, right? But the main reason I set goals is because I set goals to require, so I demand more out of me than I ever would have asked for. If I don't have a goal, I would have just did my normal, which most people operate at about 40%. I see this every time I run an event. I've spoken in 5 different countries around the world, so at least 5 different nations do the exact same thing. I say, put up your hand as high as it can go. People put up their hand. I say, great, stop. Look around. Some people are standing up, some people are sitting down. I say, go 10% more. Everybody goes more. More people stand up. The people who are standing up stretch more. I say, go another 10%. People on their tippy toes, go another 10%. And they're finding fucking ways to jump or stand on people's shoulders or get on a table or something. Yeah. I say, I told you in the beginning to go as high as you could go. And you gave me what you thought legitimately was the best you could do. But it was far from it. What I've noticed is people who usually operate, their normal, they think is good, is about 40% of what they can actually get out. So without a goal, we'll never get that other 60%. If we're just coasting and we're just going for like the normal targets or what's expected from us, we'll ask for about that 40%. So I tend to go, what's a big goal? I set it and then I stretch it a little more. What's that extra 10%? Because what if I actually did hit it? Like what if I, I think people get caught up in the whole, but what if I don't hit it? Which is just interesting. The idea of fear of failing is just a very interesting concept. But I would rather fail. Like if I set the goal here and got an extra 10%, I would rather fail somewhere in that next 10% than achieve this. I actually get more pissed off when I achieve a goal because I know I could have gone more.
I'm curious on this front. So this is something I haven't quite figured out in my own mind around how ambitious should a goal be. Because I find for myself, yeah, sure, I can set a more ambitious goal. Let's use a trivial example. I say, it's pretty doable for me to make 1 video a week on YouTube, but like it would be a bit of a stretch to make 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 videos per week. That would be a reasonable stretch, and I could do it. And setting the goal of making, let's say, 3 videos a week would force me to learn more things and make more videos and serve more people. But then I'm kind of thinking, Yeah, but like, one video is enough.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty content with my life. And actually, one video allows me to serve in the way that I want. It doesn't feel like so much content that my entire life is spent like trying to crank out YouTube videos. It gives me enough time to, I don't know, hang out with friends and chill out and play some video games and read fiction because that's what I want. And I'm still a little unsure as to, am I missing a trick here by not going for a more ambitious goal rather than compared to one that I know I can achieve fairly easily. Any thoughts?
Yeah, well, what would happen if you set your new goal, knowing what you can accomplish? So you set goals thinking, I can probably do that. If we do this and this and this,
Yeah.
I've got a pretty damn good chance of hitting that.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Do that, and then just go, just make it a little bit bigger, 10, 20, 30% bigger, and then ask yourself the question, what would I need to do differently to actually get to that? And then I guess you'll know right away. You'll either go along the journey of going, I'm doing more than what I've ever done. And I'm either going, shit, I didn't know I could do this. Or you'll be like, actually, fuck this, because now I've got less time to do the things I love doing, like traveling and hanging with my girlfriend and video games. I don't actually like this. I think it comes down to individual values, which is why I try to not put too much information into my content of my perception of the world, because that's my values. And we have a huge values hierarchy.
Yeah.
Like you just did. What are your top 5 values?
New or old?
Your new ones.
My new ones. Number 1, vitality. Number 2, love. Number 3, contribution. Number 4, growth. And number 5, passion.
Great. So if you set a goal, none of them were wealth, money, success. If you set a goal to be like, I want to 10x my income next year, it's going to go against everything that's super important to you. It's probably going to come, I'm not suggesting anything, but it could, if you were to have a drastic increase in your income, it's probably going to come at the cost of some more work hours, maybe at the cost of a little bit of vitality. Maybe some gym will get sacrificed. Like, it's just possible. It's like, it's going to be hard to keep your vitality super good and also reach new heights. So it's going to clash with what your unconscious mind thinks is the highest, most important thing.
Yeah.
So if you listen to a podcast like this, you're like, oh, but Morgan says I should do this. And then we try to do it. It goes against what is actually really important for you. And I think, I think success actually is living a life in your values.
Yeah.
See, my second highest value is success. So I get obsessed on going, how can I actually just do better? I get obsessed on, I want to make sure that when I get to the finish line of my life, when I meet the person I could have become, I'm way better than him. I want to make sure that I get there and the other guy I could have become looks at me and goes, fuck, you did well. Good job. That's what just gets me going. Like, I think even the day when I never have to work ever again, which, I quit my job at 23. I was financially free. I didn't really have to come back out and build new businesses, but I wanted to. And I think that's important for me. So if I was to just coast and do nothing, I think after like 2 or 3 days, I'd get bored and hate it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's the same for me. In that, like, periods of time where I've not been, again, just to use that trivial example, making YouTube videos, I have felt less good than in times where I have been, because for me, a YouTube video is like the vehicle that I use to teach and to share something that I've learned, and it's just kind of interesting. But it's when, again, this speaks to the idea of power. When it feels optional, I want to do it. And when I feel like I'm doing it in the spirit of service to someone else, I feel like I want to do it.
Because one of your values was contribution?
Yeah, contribution, love, growth, passion, courage. When it feels like it's in service to someone else and when I feel like it's optional, then I want to do it. But as soon as I feel like, oh, there's a deadline on this, because there's a sponsor deadline and the sponsor's paying 20 grand for this video, and I'm like, first world problem, but then it sucks some of the joy out of it. And it speaks to this idea of like extrinsic, intrinsic motivation. Even when you enjoy doing something, if you start introducing extrinsic motivators that like you get lots of money for doing the thing, it actually takes away some of the joy of doing the thing. And you would think it wouldn't. You would think that like, oh my God, I get to make this video, which I would have done anyway, and I also get paid money for it. But if that money comes with a deadline, that's a removal of autonomy, a removal of a certain type of power. I also like annoyingly value freedom quite a lot, and I kind of want to have the freedom to live, learn, and teach on my own terms. And so whenever any of this stuff clashes with freedom, then it starts to feel bad, and I start to feel like, okay, this process is not sustainable. Yeah, I can grind it out for a bit, but I want to live life in a way that doesn't feel like a grind, that feels like I'm doing things that feel good.
Yeah.
Any of that makes sense?
Makes total sense. But did you go against any of that? Wow. So you're a doctor. you were building your YouTube on the side to get out. Was there periods of that journey there where you did things that didn't feel good because you knew it was the way out?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the thing a lot of people don't talk about these days. So because there's majority of people are out there listening to these podcasts going, I'm in a job or I'm doing something and I'm building, I'm on the grind. And then people, because I did the same thing for years. I hustled like a psychopath, quit my job, moved to LA for a bit, then moved to Mexico. And I was like, oh my God, I just found morning routines. I was like, oh my God. I started telling everyone about morning routines. You got to do this, you got to do this. You know, because now I have all this time.
Yeah.
I have time to do a 3-hour fucking morning routine.
Yeah.
Before, I would wake up, get in the shower, and I'd be checking messages on my phone in the shower. So I'm like, habit stacking.
Yeah.
I'm in the shower and reply to fucking messages because I got no time.
Yeah.
Right? I would rather sleep 5 more minutes than get up and meditate. But so I'm really big on sort of, the actual portions. I think there's certain things to do in certain times. And because I think if people would be like, well, I'm just going to do what really feels right now, they might not actually... I'm still convinced. I'm yet to find someone who goes, no, I did what felt amazingly perfect every single step of the way, and now I'm really successful. There's definitely periods of, I didn't like it for a while.
Yeah.
But that's what drove me.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, there's something around like, what's the top value kind of here? Because back when I had a day job, my top value was freedom. And freedom to me meant being able to quit the day job if I wanted to. And so even in times where it'd be like 1 o'clock in the morning, I've arrived late from a night shift, from a shift that's just finished. I've got to be up at like 7 the next day, but it's a Sunday and I haven't sent my email newsletter that week. And I was like, I know I'm going to be consistent with this. Bleary-eyed, getting myself out of bed, getting the iPad or whatever, and just sort of like trying to write something and it taking an hour and losing an hour of sleep. That did not feel good. I was not like, oh, feel good productivity. I'm like finding a way to make this feel good. Like, it just didn't feel good some of the time. But my reason for doing it was, this is my ticket to freedom, and freedom is the thing that I really value.
Yeah.
And now in this new season of my life, like 7 years later, health and vitality is a thing I value more than freedom. And I already have freedom, so I don't really. It's easy to not value something when you have it already.
Yeah.
And actually, love and contribution, and feeling as if I'm sort of showing up with love with my friends and family, was less important to me 7 years ago when I was building the business and trying to grind it out so that I could quit the day job. But now it's very important to me. And if that comes at the expense of, quote, success or financial success or more money, then that's totally fine as well.
Yeah.
And so, I think a lot of it is down to what season of life you are. And then within that, still trying to find a way to feel good about the process.
Yes.
And I think that's, again, this idea of like a seemingly contradictory idea that not everything you do is going to feel good all the time. But everything you do, you can always choose to approach it in a way that makes it feel better. Like when I woke up bleary-eyed to write my newsletter at 1 o'clock in the morning, one way I could choose to approach that is like, oh, for fuck's sake, why do I have to do this? Like, what did I sign up for? But another way I could choose to approach the same thing is like, you know what? I'm willing to sacrifice an hour of sleep for the sake of working on my dream. It's going to feel good. And it's like, either way, I have to do the same thing. So I might as well just choose to approach it with a more optimistic attitude. And I did that some of the time, and I didn't do that some of the time. And if honestly, if there's one message I would go back and tell myself, it's, bro, enjoy the journey a little bit more. Because you're going to be all right. Like, we got this. Just like focus on enjoying yourself as much as you possibly can while all of this cool shit is happening.
Yeah. I love it. Okay, what are we up to? We're up to number 6. We must reframe our failures.
Yeah, that's a pretty standard idea in personal development as well. Like, when we think of things as failures, it makes it very hard to feel playful about them. There's a really cool experiment that a guy called Mark Rober did, and he's a YouTuber now, but he used to work at NASA, and then I think worked at Apple for a bit. And he does these sort of science education videos on YouTube, and they're really good. But he did this fun experiment where he was teaching people how to code. He got 50,000 people in his audience to do this online coding puzzle thing that would teach them how to code. But the trick was that it was an impossible puzzle, or rather, it was like really hard. And he wasn't really interested in teaching them how to code. He was interested in their approach to failure. So he split the groups. He split the 50,000 into 2 groups. And for group number 1, whenever they failed the puzzle, they got a message saying, "You failed. Please try again," and they would do it again. But for group number 2, those other 25,000 people, whenever they failed the puzzle, they would get a message that said, you have failed, you've lost 5 points. You now have 195 points. Please try again. And
the points meant nothing?
The points meant absolutely nothing. Completely arbitrary, just made them up, and that was the message. The only difference between the two groups was just that one error message. And he found out that the people in group number 2, the ones who lost 5 points, they made less than half the number of attempts to solve the puzzle as the people in group 1. Less than half. It's like 5 attempts on average versus 12 attempts on average. That is absolutely fucking enormous. The difference between doing something 5 times and doing something 12 times, or doing something twice as often, twice as much until it succeeds, is absolutely astronomical when it comes to other things in life, like starting a business or working out or starting a YouTube channel or writing a book, anything like that. And all it was that arbitrary error message that you've lost 5 points. And so he's got a really good TED talk about this where he talks about, thinking like a scientist. Like when a scientist fails an experiment, it's not really a failure. It's just another data point. There's a thing that Thomas Edison said. I think he was on his like 10,000th failure at making the light bulb, and a journalist was like, how do you feel? You failed 10,000 times. And he was like, no, I haven't failed 10,000 times. I've just found 10,000 ways in which this has not yet worked. Mm-hmm. And when we change our approach to failure, if we think of failure as being this terrible thing, we're less likely to try stuff. We're less likely to have fun with it because now the stakes feel high. But if we think of failure as like, oh, whatevs, it's fine. Again, it just allows us to play more freely. It allows us to be more productive and more creative and less stressed and less attached to these outcomes that may be outside of our control.
I thought about this a little while ago, and I asked myself, where does this fear from failure really come from? And I'm pretty convinced that it's school. Because if you think about when you're in school and you get an F, it's literally like no one knows what A, B, C, D means.
Yeah.
But everyone knows that an F is fail.
Yeah.
And if we get an F, then what happens? We need to resit it again. We need to do the thing that we didn't want to do already. We need to reset it again. We get punished. Our parents get called. Maybe we get a detention. Or, maybe we even get sent back to class. All these things where we're like, that we don't want that to happen. So we associate that failure is something to absolutely avoid at all costs.
Yeah.
So then we strive to make sure, like you said, memorizing things and making sure we can get the best grades over and over and over because we don't want to fail.
Yeah.
But then what happens is we come to the entrepreneur world and people they will go, well, and this is not conscious, but unconsciously, I won't attempt that because I'm not sure if I can 100% pass it or not.
Yeah.
Therefore, I won't do it because therefore what I believe is failure equals bad punishment. I'm an idiot.
Yep.
I won't do it.
Yeah, mate, I completely agree. I think it's not even the F thing. I think I was good in school. For me, anything less than 100% was failure.
Oh, wow.
Because if I didn't get 100%, my grandma would be like, oh, what happened to the other 2% if I got 98%?
What's your background?
Pakistani.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and my grandma was a teacher as well, so she was like, she was super nice about it. But like, I associated so much to the idea of success. I was friends with all the other clever kids, and we were all in sort of mini competition with each other to be like, hey, I got 98%, you got 99%. Oh, interesting. Wow. For me, like, I went in, did the 11 plus entrance exam, and my position on entry in the school was position number 1 because I did the best in that exam out of the other 150 kids in the year. And so I was like, oh my God, I have to strive to maintain this position because dropping down to number 2 to me would have been failure. And so I put in a lot of time and energy and a lot of self-worth attached to this idea of continuing to tick the box of Ali Abdaal is the top of the year. And then I got to university and got completely shafted by that whole thing, like punched in the face because I realized, oh my God, I'm no longer top of the year anymore. But I think this idea of failure permeates like literally everything that we attempt. I think girls have it a lot worse than guys do as well. If I think of kind of my female friends who are doing entrepreneurship stuff or like YouTube stuff, girls are taught from a young age to always strive to be perfect and to like downplay their own successes. And so it's like, as a girl, you've got to like, you're trying to be good at the thing, but you're not trying to be too good at the thing because if you are, then like that looks bad and like no one, if a girl is succeeding, she's seen as that is often seen in kind of a negative light, but just because of the messaging that girls get in society and stuff. And so a lot of YouTubers that I do these, I happen to have found myself in the position of being like an unofficial therapist to a lot of YouTuber friends. And every YouTuber that I know struggles with imposter syndrome and like self-worth overly attached to numbers and feeling like, oh, if this video didn't do well, it means that I'm a failure. But the girls have it way worse, and it's all this conditioning that they have there. It's like, oh fuck, like my opinions are worthless, and like, oh, this video is no good unless it hits like 1 million views, and all of this kind of stuff. It's something we all struggle with. But man, all of the conditioning that we get that any form of failure is just like a terrible thing.
Yeah. So number 7. So what I'm curious for this is, I think this is just like a question I kind of put in, because the overall thing I'm really getting is to actually lead with a lot more play and a lot more fun. So, and then I started to think there's still some days for me that is just genuinely stressful. Like we're doing like big things or deadlines or whatever. Like, but I do it to myself.
Sure.
So how can we actually switch out stress for more play?
Yeah. Honestly, the main thing is to just take shit less seriously. You know, yeah, you've got a big deadline coming up. Who gives a fuck? It's not life and death. It's like, worst case scenario, you'll lose a bit of money. You've got enough money. You're financially free at 23. Who cares? Who gives a fuck? You know, the event flops a little bit. People are going to forget next week. Who cares? I've started getting bad reviews for my book coming in. You know, we sent advanced copies out, and people on Goodreads.
How?
Because we sent out advanced copies to like professional book reviewers, and they've started posting reviews on Goodreads. And I looked at it this morning, and I saw, oh my goodness, like there's like a couple of like 2-star reviews, a couple of 3-star reviews, and I kind of started reading them. And I was like, yeah. And initially, my initial reaction is like, oh. It's that internal feeling of stress of like, oh my God, like have I released something that's really shit? And what I find helpful is just to remind myself, no one gives a fuck. It's all like, who cares? Some people like the book, some people don't. That's fine. It doesn't change my life one way or another whether this person gave it 2 stars or 3 stars or 5 stars. Makes no difference to me. Do I want to write more books? Yeah, because it was fun. Do I want to write more books? Yeah, because I think it could help people and I like learning stuff and sharing it. It's not that deep. And I think even, you know, people always like, oh, yeah. There's a philosopher, Bertrand Russell, who has a great quote from one of his essays around like, I think it's something to the effect of one of the biggest sources of misery in a human's life is when we think that our work is terribly important. No one gives a fuck. Our work's not that important. It's not that deep. Even doctors, like the best surgeons that I know, I've been in the operating theater in life or death emergencies. The best surgeons are the ones who, even then, are approaching it with a little bit of lightness, a little bit more, you know, there's background music. They're like maybe cracking a joke while they're saving this patient from bleeding out. The ones who are like full on, obviously, you know, there are times where you have to laser focus, but like the ones who create this atmosphere of stress in the operating theater, that's when more mistakes are made. That's when like the nurses and the anesthetists and stuff feel less comfortable speaking up if there's a mistake being made. That's when like everyone gets drained. There's like a sense of, it's reducing the importance. It's not that deep. Again, way easier said than done. But I try my best to train my mind to do this, that whenever I feel that sense of stress, I ask myself, will this matter in 10 minutes? Will this matter in 10 weeks? Will this matter in 10 years? Does anyone actually give a fuck? No one gives a fuck. It's actually all fine. And very rarely are the things that are stressful. If someone's listening to this podcast, it's very unlikely that the things that make them stressful, that the things that feel stressful are the things that are literally going to cause their family to starve. It's just pretty unlikely given the demographics of your podcast. Pretty unlikely. So for most of us, our work is not that important. Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
I try and tell myself this like time and time again whenever I feel that sense of stress, and I think over time I've gotten a lot better at just not experiencing it.
Yeah. Do you meditate or anything like that? Like
no.
You're like a Zen monk. You're just so chill.
Yeah, mate. I want to get into meditation. I've heard good things about it. I'm rereading Waking Up by Sam Harris right now. Okay. I want to understand like the whole spirituality thing. It's really good. But I think a lot of it is just
mindset, just your perception of things, I think, is the biggest thing that makes you. Like you're just like, yeah, it just doesn't matter.
Yeah, I mean, I was meant to be on the Today Show this morning, and they cancelled me like 2 minutes before I was meant to go there because of the floods in Queensland or something.
Yeah, like, got a bigger thing to
I mentioned this to like the publicist was like, oh my God, Ali, I'm so sorry. You must be so disappointed. I rang my mum. She was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. You must be so disappointed. I was like, I don't think I'm bullshitting myself, but I'm genuinely not. Like, I don't give a fuck. It's like, if I go on the Today Show on national TV, that's cool. If I don't, that is also cool. Like, who cares? In the grand scheme of things, like none of this is all of this is completely meaningless. Yeah. So like, let's just enjoy the ride while we're there. Again, easier said than done.
All right, number 8. What is? I'm probably gonna say this wrong. What is the Shoshin approach?
Yeah, so Shoshin is a thing from Zen Buddhism, which roughly translates to beginner's mind. And this speaks to the idea that when we think that we are good at something, when you think you're an expert at a thing, or you think you've got some competence in a particular field, you start to attach a lot of like ego and identity to the idea of being good at this thing. Someone who is good at making videos attaches a lot of identity to that. Someone who's a good writer attaches, identity to that. Someone who was good in school attaches this identity to, I'm good at this thing. I'm an expert. I consider myself good at this thing. And in that position, a lot of us find it very difficult to make progress in those areas because we've closed our mind off to new perspectives and new things that we can learn. At one point in my, I read a lot of self-help books, and I was like, oh, I know all this personal development stuff. And then I went to a Tony Robbins event, and I was like, oh, there are levels to this whole thing. Wow, I feel like a total beginner. And that was such a nice feeling, because it's so nice to feel like a beginner, because when you're a beginner, and you're taking it less seriously because you're a beginner, you're open to multiple perspectives, and it means you can make progress a lot quicker. And, we talked about this earlier, but progress leads to happiness and, this feeling of feel good. When we feel as if we're making progress in an area, it drives dopamine, it makes us feel good, it makes everything better. So the Shoshin approach is basically this idea of beginner's mind. Whenever you find yourself doing something and you find yourself slipping into the mode of thinking you are good at the thing, take a step back and try and just reframe it as if you're still a beginner. That means, for example, when approaching conversations with people that you feel are sort of inferior to you in some way in the social status hierarchy. If you're a $10 million entrepreneur and you speak to a 100K entrepreneur, you can have this sort of like expert's curse thinking like, oh, I know my shit. There's nothing this guy can teach me. But if you approached it as beginner's mind, if you sort of emptied the cup of your brain, as it were, and just said, hey, I can learn, there is something to be learned from everyone. Let me just genuinely approach this conversation as if I'm peers with this person, even though I make 100 times more money than his business does. We're still peers. I can still learn something from this guy. And it's just a much nicer way to live. And this was a strategy that Phil Jackson, the basketball coach of the Chicago Bulls, was used to use back in the day. He was a big fan of Zen Buddhism, and he would always try and approach his own coaching and encourage his players to approach the game of basketball with this idea of beginner's mind, that you can always learn more. And yeah, just speaks to this idea of things feel much better when you feel as if you're making progress, but it's very hard to make progress when you already think you're an expert.
I love it. So we've gotten through 8 so far out of the 17 unconventional ways to be more productive in your life. What are we going to do? This is the first time I've ever done this. I want these guys to soak this stuff in, and then we're going to come back for a part 2. So where can they get your book? We'll put all the links. Guys, check out the links, everything in the show notes. Everything's going to be there. But your book is live today.
Yeah.
Where can everybody actually get this? Yeah. And start soaking up some of this before we even release part 2.
Yeah, man. So it's called Feel Good Productivity. So you can go to feelgoodproductivity.com, or you can check it out on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Waterstones or wherever you happen to get your books. But yeah, feel free to check it out if you like.
Amazing. So I usually have a question I ask all my guests at the end of the podcast, but I'm going to ask you it on part 2.
Okay.
So that's a wrap for part 1. Make sure you guys subscribe to this podcast to get part 2, because we're going to dive into another 9 of your unconventional ways to be more productive.
Let's do it.
More productive. So go ahead, subscribe. I'll see you guys on the next episode.